Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Reframing AI and Creative Technologies. Today, we've got some incredibly knowledgeable people on the stage who are going to dig into the topic of AI and creativity. And as you've probably all seen, it's also one of the most hotly debated topics in online spaces right now. My name is Rowena Murray, and I'm thrilled to be here and be your moderator for today's panel discussion. I'll get the housekeeping out of the way right away. I don't expect anyone to actually switch their phone off, but set to silent would be really cool, thank you. We are going to have a panel discussion initially, and then we will open up the floor to questions that you can direct to either the group or to individual speakers. We don't have roving mics, so I will get you to pop your hand up and then shout at me, and I'll repeat it on the mic just so that we can capture that on the recording. And if you can keep your questions brief and specific, that would be brilliant. And just before I take my housekeeping apron off, today's discussion is definitely intended to foster really constructive dialogue. During the Q&A, shenanigans won't keep that microphone in your hand for very long. So on to the topic at hand. Today, we're here to explore, gosh, it's an interesting space, but it's the vast potential and also the emerging creative options in the generative artificial intelligence tool space, particularly looking at innovation and opportunity. As the tech, drives forward faster than the meteorite and Independence Day, we're going to look at creativity, progress, and how sustainable things are as well. So we're really privileged to have with us a great panel of experts with us today. Please join me in welcoming. We've got Bhautik Joshi from Canva. So Bhautik sits at the intersection of art, science and engineering, which is a pretty great spot to dwell from the sounds of things. Bhautik has worked with global tech and creative giants like Industrial Light and Magic, Flickr, Adobe, and most recently Canva. As an engineer, he's leveraged his skills across some really broad and deep real-time data analysis at web scale, stereoscopy tools for feature films, motion capture, virtual and augmented reality, pre-visualization for TV, game development, real-time computing, signal analysis, surgical simulation, and medical imaging. Is there anything that this person does not do? At the end of the stage there, we'd also love to welcome Jessie Hughes, a senior creative technologist and artist in residence at Leonardo.AI. Jessie is an internationally recognised Australian new media artist, technologist and screenwriter whose works have exhibited at Sundance Film Festival, South by Southwest, Cannes and the Tate Modern. We've also got Zoe in the middle here. Zoe Hu is a designer, animator, sometimes coder, swimmer and human being based in Melbourne, and she's the senior designer at Melbourne agency Love Plus Money. So with AI being such a hot topic, we really wanted to cover some fresh ground here today and frame the conversation around AI and creativity a bit away from big tech and away from the US in particular. We thought it'd be interesting to think about what's going on elsewhere in the world and zig instead of zag. Today's panel, as I said before, is here to explore opportunities and innovations, but we do have to look a little bit about the sustainable and ethics side of it. But we want to tips of the hat rather than go too deep on that side of it. What are the uses? What are the benefits? And what are the drawbacks in creative industries? So what I'd love to do to get things started is to set a bit of a scene. I'd love a 1-minute response from each of you for the directed question you're going to get. So I'm going to start with Bhautik. This is going to be a clanger. Sure. Let's keep it simple. For the people watching at home, what is a generative AI tool?
Gosh, generative AI tool. If you want to go with sort of like what is going to be loosely termed a dictionary definition, a generative AI tool is a piece of technology that has been trained on a particular domain, right? So let's just say images or videos or maybe even just text alone. And it gets combined with some sort of way of expressing it. Most oftentimes that is text itself. And the idea is that you've got pairs of information, right? So you've got text paired with a picture, or you've got text paired with a video. And then what that allows you to do is that it learns the relationships between the images and the text. And what you can do then is that you can drive it, right? So you could use the text itself to drive the output, right? So you give it a particular request and it will try to fulfill that request using what it has learned about the relationships between the text and the images or text and other text.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Jessie, in your experience, what can it do well at the moment?
Right now, it's excellent at taking what's in your head and giving you an image in response to that. And I think like in terms of the beginning stages of ideating, iterating, like anything, I suppose, to before it going out into the world, I think it's very, very good at for the creative process. The level of whether I consider it like commercially viable, like is this image passable for industry? Sometimes it is and sometimes it's not. And so I think once we hit over the line of I use the term indiscernible, like if that image is indiscernible, whether it's been generated or not generated, that's when like the commercial viability is going to be more successful. But right now it's like, I can use this as part of my creative process. It's a great process tool.
As opposed to the end game. Yeah. And Zoe, what do you think it sucks at the moment?
Great question. What it sucks at? Let me have a think.
And I figure this will be a bit of a moving feast too. Something that sucks this week probably.
Yes, absolutely. Like when I first started using image generation to now, it's come up in leaps and bounds like it's crazy. So at the moment, my main frustrations are getting fine-grained control. So as a designer, I have a very specific vision in my mind. Like if I want a picture of a dog, I don't want just any picture of a dog. I want a very specific picture of a dog, right? Maybe I want like a patch over its left eye and with the sun at 2 o'clock, like with a 50mm lens. Like it's a very specific thing as a designer that I want. And sometimes you'll be able to hit like 80% of what you have in mind, and that's already pretty good. But getting that last like 10 or 20% can be really difficult.
There's a really good theory at the moment with Jen where it's like there's the 20-80 rule. It's a pretty common like productivity rule, whatever. But with AI, it's very different. You put in your 10% at the start, you give 80% to AI, and then you do your 10% at the end. And so it's just been a different way of working, which has been more like helpful. Yeah,
absolutely. So Jessie, one for you. If we look at the life of AI as a little bit of a storybook, in your experience, where are we right now?
Like I just relate the whole thing to like the web boom, like the internet, the beginning of the internet. I believe right now we are about to watch the beginning of the internet kind of thing, and it just makes it very. Like when I try to explain what's going on to my friends, I don't think we've got the hype of like in the media, we're like, oh, it's going to eat all of our jobs or whatever. I don't think any of us can literally think 5 years ahead to where this technology is going to go in every single domain. So yeah, at the beginning of the internet, I don't think any of us would have predicted Instagram 30 years ago, like, or maybe you did, or there's the whole world and like our relationship, something like, it's like 70% of relationships are built off dating apps these days. Like our entire foundational structure of a society down to like how we mate is like now because of, the internet. So I think that's kind of where we're at right now with Jen.
Yeah, amazing. Well, Bhautik, my next question was, where do we think the next chapter will be? Maybe we just set that whole question on fire, or do you have a bit of a theory running around?
In terms of where we go next with all of this, I think, we things are definitely taking off. I think there's no question about that. But I think we're also going to reach a stage of more maturity around this. And I think as much as it's sort of important to sort of figure out what these tools are for, I think we're starting to also figure out what they're not for as well, and developing some sophistication around that, and really sort of figuring out how we're going to situate these tools. Right? They're not, they haven't lived up to the hype that they've promised, and that's okay. The hype was necessary to sort of get it off the ground. This is pretty standard for sort of research work. But now that we've reached this phase in terms of where it goes next, I think it's going to both be more exciting and also really, really boring. This stuff becomes just very ordinary, right? And that's not good or bad. That's just a fairly sort of natural evolution for this kind of technology.
Well, I think something you touched on, which I thought was really interesting, was around maturity and the way we use it. And one of the things that I've been seeing, personally, a lot of is AI generated images popping up on Facebook, and people with a little bit less media literacy are going, oh my goodness, isn't this the most adorable thing, and that kind of thing. Open this up to anyone on the bench really, but where do we think media literacy needs to sit to have a healthy relationship with AI at the moment.
This is like without a doubt the scariest, the scariest thing about this technology. I'm not going to go doom and gloom with you because I could seriously, you can go as dark as you want to, but like our entire political landscape, which is already in a completely divided society because of our social, like online networks, and then you start adding deep fakes, which are completely getting very, very passable. Yeah, deepfakes are a funny topic. The TikTok recently, I don't know if you saw that they've invited deepfake creators. So this is like already commercially, people are like, yeah, let's do it. So for example, if you're an influencer and you don't want to be bothered to make your boring content anymore, you can use your likeness. And I, who sells, I don't know, sell water bottles, I can be like, okay, great, awesome. I'm going to buy your likeness to sell a water bottle. You then it gives you a script and it's a deep fake of you saying it. And now it's going trending on TikTok through your follower feed. You haven't written the thing. It's not your face. Your audience does it's like, this is available today. And this is like mid 2024. So, I mean, where we're going with it is just unbelievable. It's also interesting that like TikTok has set the precedent that this is like where we're going. I mean, every industry, OnlyFans, obviously, like all of the AI intimacy things, that's a very popular angle. But like, yeah, the fact for marketing and advertising, and if you don't think they're doing it, like everyone's doing it. So it's like, that's a scary shit. I can go into that, but I try to avoid that because it does that. I don't know. Because when it's motivated by profit, like what? Yeah.
No. There's an interesting parallel to draw here, I think, if you look at movie making technology. So I think human beings and generation of human beings, I think, is a very interesting topic because, you know, as human beings, we have a huge chunk of our brain that's dedicated to looking at other people and going like, is this human? Is this real or not? Right. And that sets an interesting sort of bar. And if you look at movie technology, really from sort of like the mid 90s to sort of the late 2010s, arguably still going today, where there was this kind of this arms race between a bunch of the big movie studios, where every year one of them would have some innovation saying, okay, this was the most photorealistic human ever. You know, this is the most amazing piece of technology. And like, you know, after this, we're not going to need actors because we can just generate computer generated humans. And you'd watch this movie and you'd go, man, it's pretty good. And then you watch it a year later and go, this is the worst thing that I've ever seen. Right. And I think it's worth not counting humans out of the race here. We're pretty good at discriminating what's real and what's not. And I think, you know, we already look at AI generated images from a couple of years ago that were frankly astonishing. And we look at them now and go, oh, it's a bit crap. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't be concerned about it. And I think there are definitely significant impacts in the now, right? Well, we are at the, you know, we're on the losing side of this arms race right now, I don't mind saying. But, you know, I think there is going to be a tipping point where this technology starts to plateau and it will become, like I said, more ordinary, right? And I think there is a point the other side of this where it won't be nearly as convincing as perhaps it is now. And I think that's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess one of the things I was really interested in chatting about today, because we are trying to look at the opportunities and the creativity and the innovation, is, you know, the concept of using AI more for the stuff that no one actually really wants to do but just has to, and letting humans do more of the awesome stuff. I mean, to throw one parallel in, I've spent a lot of my career in advertising, and when you are programmatic digital ads and you spend 3 solid days uploading GIFs and uploading, you know, JPEGs and clicking on which online magazine it's going to appear in, how long for, and what the budget is, man, that should be an AI job tomorrow. And so, yeah, I'm really curious to hear, you know, a little bit of a wish list. What is the boring crap that you'd love AI to get out of your workflow that it's not right now?
The easiest like direct comparison is like Photoshop's lasso tool. So I don't know if anyone's used Photoshop, but back in the day, if you wanted to cut out a picture of a horse, you literally had to sit there with this bloody little tool. And if you mix one pixel, seriously, you mix one pixel, yes, like, great, let's fuck, there's 20 minutes again. So they have to like go through and do the thing. Now, obviously, we put it in a tool and say, hey, I want the horse. And in an instant, I have the horse. That is a productive, beneficial tool. So when we talk about AI and the depths of AI, like I think this is the kind of this is the kind of stuff that I'm talking about with productive workflows, where it's like, this is a beneficial workflow. In the same way Netflix have this thing called media understanding platform. And so when they make, previously when you used to do like video editing for a commercial for a show, you would have to sit and watch like 10 hours of a season to like with a pen and write down, oh, there was an explosion in that scene and a bomb went off in the third hour and there was a kiss. Now they have a media understanding platform, which instead can watch the entire episode and it intelligently can label different scenes. So if I'm an editor, I can be like, hey, can you get me the scene with the red car? And instantly I have that scene. So I can use it in my edit and I can function way faster. You can use script. So I'm like, if I was a screenwriter, I'm like, oh, I have this amazing line. Please include this line. Just type it in and it can go and be like, oh yeah, that line was on episode 4, blah, blah, blah. Cut it in and I can edit like that. To me, like, and you can debate back and forth and like, yes, but like the beauty of the editing process came by watching the thing for 10 hours, whatever. Yeah, sure. But that took that editor 2 weeks to make this thing, which took 30 seconds, or they could work more productively. And now they can work on 3 other films at the same time. So you start to have these conversations of what do you lose when you remove things from practice versus what do you gain when you can work at a different, faster scale.
Most definitely. And I mean, Zoe, because you work as a, creative in your own right, as well as in a creative agency, producing design, what sort of AI tools do you have in your toolkit and what would you like to enhance with it?
Yeah, we use a range of different AI tools to help speed up our workflow. Aside from creative image generation, like just things like ChatGPT and the AIs that will listen to your meetings and take meeting notes and then create summaries and create briefs from meetings. Like that's super helpful for those people in the team because that can be very labor intensive, just writing briefs and things like that. So as a designer, there's heaps of just little things that have it's vastly improved my life. Like writing copy. I'm not a copywriter, but as a designer, you should be able to write some copy, and I can, but I'm pretty slow at it. It's not my talent. But as my boss says, words are so important. You can't just put lorem ipsum in your design and call it a day. Words matter, and so he always emphasizes putting in copy that actually makes sense. And so instead of me having to sit there and write a paragraph that makes sense, I can just whiz over to ChatGPT and it'll spit me out something. So that's another example. An area, going back to the previous question, area where I would love to see development in AI is in animation. So I do a lot of animation, mainly using After Effects, 2D animation. And so far, I haven't really seen any tools that really...
Meta released it today.
Meta released something for After Effects?
3D.
Oh, for 3D.
3D.
It's breaking news.
Yeah, breaking. How many hours ago, guys? Welcome to the world of AI. Jesus, I don't sleep, literally. But yeah, it's this idea that you can now do 3D things, and it's because their funding's in VR, spatial. They're moving into spatial. So to me, it's I'm sorry, you finished?
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
No, that's exciting.
Yeah.
Again, nothing for After Effects. Come on, guys. 2D. I want something for 2D animation. One thing that kind of has helped is you can now go into ChatGPT and ask it to give you code snippets for After Effects. But again, I know developers use ChatGPT a lot, but there's also code and animation. But again, it's not really made for it at the moment. So I asked it to write me a script for After Effects, and it gave me a literal film script. So the understanding, the understanding was just not quite there yet. So that's something I'm looking keenly at.
Yeah, definitely to be hotly anticipated. Bhautik, how about you? What are the things in your daily toolkit that you're getting a lot of a run out of?
Gosh, it's kind of a 2-speed thing. Okay, yes, I used some AI during my day job, but because I'm building AI tools, I guess I'm a little bit of an AI skeptic, weirdly. I mean, you kind of have to be, right? You got to sort of, because, building the tooling, you've got to sort of view it from a critical angle in terms of just understanding, is this actually working or not? And am I kidding myself? In terms of day-to-day stuff, sure. Okay, I use ChatGPT. I tend to use a lot of engineer speak. My speaking style can sometimes be a little bit formal and it can be a little bit direct, I guess. So sometimes I'll use, I don't mind admitting, sometimes I'll use GPT to sort of soften my language a little bit when I'm talking to other people. That's okay. That's genuinely, it's very handy. It's nice to be nice. So
I've got someone in mind I'm going to suggest that to actually.
Yeah. Look, why not? I don't mind admitting it, right? So there's that. But then in terms of sort of in terms of, I think maybe it's just an interesting point to sort of reflect on, like, what things do we like? How do we choose which problems we're going to solve, right? Like, as a bunch of AI engineers, we can pretty much do whatever we like, right? There's so much opportunity, but how do you choose the right things to work on? So we get a lot of user feedback. We listen to a lot of people in terms of just like, how they're working and understanding what's causing them trouble. And there's definitely a whole huge category of us that are sort of like, can you fix this? Can you just do this? And those aren't where the innovation comes from. It's really like right out at the fringes where somebody asks, like, I wish you could do X. They'll ask you for something that sounds very far-fetched, and you go, okay, that's where the interesting problem to solve is, right? Because like, it's the stuff that folks just assume that can't be done, and then that's you interrogate that, and then you sort of like use your creativity to sort of bridge that and go, okay, yeah, this is an interesting thing that we can work on.
Yeah, absolutely. Essentially, the Nightshade and Glaze tools are they're basically designed so that when designers want to want to put their work out on the internet or into the world, they can use these AI tools. One actively corrupts if large learning models suck that piece of artwork in, it'll actively corrupt what's going in and what's going on around it, and Glaze just makes it harder to read and identify. And I was curious to touch on with the panel, should creatives who are putting their work out on the wild interwebs be using tools like these?
Do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I can speak to that just a little bit. So yeah, just sort of echo on that. So yeah, Nightshade and Glaze were developed by researchers. It was the idea being that, like, is it possible to sort of poison the well, so to speak, for AI training? And there's lots of reasons why this is important, right? Like, folks want to they want to be able to protect their property. They want to sort of prevent things being sucked into sort of models so that that their work doesn't get reproduced without them. But I think it's also worth noting that these are technical approaches, and it's an arms race, right? And it touches on a part of the research community that perhaps isn't as visible, which is, you do have security researchers, and security researchers, it's this thing, this goes all the way back to sort of like people used to pick locks back in the 1850s, right? Like, this security community has gone a long way back, and what they're doing is that they're constantly, you've got a group of people who are trying to create state-of-the-art locks, and you've got another group of people who are picking the locks, right? And there's just a constant sort of push and pull. This is not like this is a new concept, right? This has been going for a very, very, very long time. And if I remember rightly, I remember reading a paper, was it about a month ago, maybe 6 weeks ago? This stuff moves really fast, where both Nightshade and Glaze had been defeated. But that doesn't mean that there won't be another technique that comes along. Now, in terms of in terms of whether these tools are the right things to use, right? I'd say that they are ephemeral, right? In that, sure, they're going to be effective for a short period of time. Then what is perhaps a better thing to do, arguably, is to sort of really try to renegotiate the social contract instead, right? And like, really, like, what does it take? Like, instead of like thinking like, technology is the problem, technology is the solution. That is not always true, right? And really understanding it, how can we better sort of situate artists so that finally they're going to get they're going to get credit for the work that they deserve, for their they've done the labor. So how do we make sure that they get paid for it, right? And that is a much more interesting and much more pragmatic conversation that has much more longevity than talking about technological solutions to the problem.
Yeah, and I was kind of, Jessie, you go.
Oh, I was going to say, like, this is a very relevant conversation. I'm sure everyone's seen what's happening with, like, everyone leaving Instagram to go to Kara. I don't know if that's following that. Pretty much a whole, but like 600,000 artists left Instagram to go to Kara because Meta said they were going to train their stuff on people's data. Meta's going to everybody who has access to anything is going to train stuff on anything. Like, I just feel like we're at that point where it's like Meta is obviously they have this massive database. They're going to train Adobe did the same thing. They were like, we're going to start training our stuff on all of your files. It just feels that that's kind of where we are, in the sense that, like, to be able to make good tools, you have to have good data. And I think that's kind of like a bit of a back and forth. The social framework, I think, is the player here, is because you're, again, like, these are the biggest tech companies in the world. So it's like, how do we kind of have ability to negotiate back and forth? And I think a social contract does have to come in at some point.
Yeah, completely agree. And I was wondering whether, technologies can potentially service creatives and artists, because we all know getting paid, getting credited, even just turning up and seeing your stuff being sold on, Temu or, other sorts of knockoff sites and things like that. Do we think that there's potentially scope for example, technology as a solution, like a blockchain-based scenario or some sort of a padlock on artwork that goes out in the world? Curious, and it's very blue sky, but
well, that was that was the irony of the Instagram discussion, because I was following all these different sides, and it was like the amount of artists that benefited from having Instagram because it finally gave them an audience to be able to sell their work to. And so it was this like double-edged sword kind of thing. It was just a very interesting perspective, in the sense that like Instagram has done amazing things for some artists, but then in the same way it's also done dreadful things for artists, because now people are creating artwork to suit clicks rather than to suit what they actually wanted to be making, etc. So it was that you have to have nuance when you go into any of these discussions. It's very easy to be like, that's evil, that's good, that's bad, whatever. But to actually really consider all of these different layers and the business models that are going in behind these things versus to how we're going, like I think it does have to have this nuanced balance. With the nightshade example, like universities, oh, lol, we're in a room of unis, like we had this whole constant ongoing debate of like, do we ban AI use or do we embrace it? And it's this back and forth, because you could, there was this school that would, be able to flag whether it was ChatGPT written or not, and back and forth. The real question is, you have students who are going to go into the world who are expected to use this technology. It's one of the most requested skills on LinkedIn. So instead, you have students that you've not allowed or nor trained going into the workforce when they're no longer competitively advantaged, when it should be their time. They're gens, they're young. They should be embracing this kind of technology. So I think it's actually a flip of all of us need to be very quickly upskilling and educating in how we embrace AI. It's a technology which is there, and the skill difference between somebody who can use ChatGPT well, and by well I mean understand how to communicate and iterate and go back and forth, versus typing in. If you type in something and you get a pretty bad response, honestly, it's probably you haven't prompted it correctly. That thing can do amazing things. It's just, you have to be able to like have this iterative kind of back and forth discussion with these technologies. So I think, education is massive, let alone like what we were saying before about skeptical, understand what's generated, what's not generated. When does it matter? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an interesting spot there, because I reckon about a year ago, I read an article by English Literature University undergraduate lecturer over in the States, and was going, "Whoa, I'm getting ChatGPT essays everywhere," and actually sort of bumped it into the curriculum a little bit and said, "Okay, I'm going to teach you how to properly brief this creature, this beastie, and then we're going to check our essays, we're going to mark them, we're going to fact check them, we're going to go through." And so the class spent a couple of weeks going through and really learning where it falls over, where it lets them down, where it's really helpful. And the consensus really was smart use of most AI tools as they sit now is almost like that 80-20 or 10-80-10 rule, which is get it going, get a bit of a basis, some research, do all your fabulous work, and then use it to polish off the corners.
Because if they didn't have that training, a kid would go on to AI, be like, "Hey, can you write this essay for me?" Blah blah blah. The essay gives you total nonsense. It's all fake, and then they submit it and hand it in. It's well written, but it's all wrong. Whereas if a student had gone and done the basic steps of research, which are like, these are my use cases, these are the things, this is how this all works. Now I'm going to use ChatGPT to help me formulate what I have researched, help me to articulate it better, and then put it back. That's how you're going to get the best use of this thing, rather than hallucinated fake content kind of stuff. So the training is really important.
There's an interesting thing that lies the other side of that, though, where I've heard it sometimes referred to as kind of like a flattening of culture. There is like ChatGPT has got our voice, right? It's pretty recognizable, right? Like I don't like it much, but whatever, some people are okay with it. And there is, we're reaching a point now where you can recognize when something has been written by ChatGPT, and sure, there may have been a human behind it. It was just a retranslation of what they said, but does that take away from like authenticity? Like how much of that is taking away sort of our agency? And I think there's an interesting push and pull there. I'm not saying don't do it,
no,
but but I mean, like, how do we sort of like bring some richness back to this, right? Like what in the end, like asking like, why are you using ChatGPT? Like, well, what's the job that you want to get done with it, right? And if you're just using it because it's a convention, maybe you should step back and sort of go, okay, like, what, like, should I be using this tool, right? And I think that just developing some sophistication around that those are the, that contextual understanding of it. That's one of the skills that I think we're gonna need to do that I don't think anybody has yet, right? And we're still figuring that out, like, collectively.
Absolutely. Now, I'm going to approach this next question in the context of actual visual AI generated work, whether it's Midjourney or that kind of thing. Can AI be interesting or AI art be interesting when it's a bit imperfect and broken rather than the heavy glazed vibe that's going on? I'm referring to those moments when, everyone had 48 teeth and 7 fingers on each hand and it was all a bit uncanny valley. As, creative people working in this visual space, have you got fondness for any of these eras or that kind of thing?
I have to say, when I have been playing around with Leonardo and have gotten unexpected results, let's just say that, honestly, I was just creeped out by it. And yeah, I tried to just move past it and try and create what I wanted to create. So far, unfortunately, I have not gotten unexpected inspiration from the accidents. But
happy accidents, they have to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think it's a function of your personal aesthetic. Like, I love surrealism. Yeah. So, this has been like past few years have just been a treat for me. Yeah. I love the weird stuff. It's pretty great.
I love the weird. I love the weird. I actually, and like, we've got so good, like, a lot of the work that I love is very dynamic, and there's people doing like cartwheels and all that stuff. Jen's still very bad at that. We can't, when it's got that high level of movement and that kind of stuff, it just, or multiple people, when you're talking about hundreds of people, like, that's where it still gets hard for us. But I think we start to lose it. But in the same way what you said, like, I look at my work that I did a year ago, which has been printed in magazines, and I'm like, oh my God, don't look at it. Oh my God, that's so bad. It's so bad. So it's like the dating with this stuff happens like weekly. It really does date aesthetic wise.
Oh, it absolutely does. Even the TikTok trends have dated. Yeah. I've had an immense fondness for the ones where the prompt would be, do a Scottish man in a sheep field, and then it'd be like, make it more intense with 3 dogs. I want the, sheep to have glitter, and all of a sudden you'd have a series of a dozen images that ended up with, Galaxy Scotsman with sheep stars and all that kind of stuff. And it was quite a moment in time, and a little bit of residual fondness for that kind of stuff.
Well, you see the neural nets, like the Google Dream, whatever that.
Deep Dream.
Deep Dream. I see pictures of Deep Dream, and I remember at the time us being like, yeah, like it's an acid trip or whatever, and I'm like, that is building the future of our entire world. But okay, like, so yeah, and like we used to laugh about the fingers, like we used to mock. This is the thing, is like we used to mock AI, and now we're like, oh better not say anything too bad. Like, yeah.
There's an angle, I think, where we also perhaps want to believe some of these things. Like, do you folks remember the Pope with the puffer jacket?
I so wanted that to be real.
I don't know, for some reason it triggered a memory. Like last night, and I was reading up about it, and there was this headline that was doing the rounds, which was "Swaggy Pope is true in our hearts." Right? Like we wanted to believe it was real, right? And like you look at the picture and you can see all of the technical defects; they're really obvious, right? But there's something about the picture that just made, like, what made it viral, made it interesting. It was just had this veneer of plausibility, right? That made us sort of engage with it. And I think that gap in between sort of like real and fake, as horrifying and as problematic as it is, it's also fascinating and really interesting. When you talk about the weirdness, it's that gap right in between that I think is the most interesting spot to be.
Scariest. That recently there was like this video that went out about Biden, whatever he was doing, stuttering or something, and the media article was, is this AI or not? And that's where we go. I think there's a term for it, but where you can deny reality because there's the possibility that it could have been fake, whatever. And so now we're getting into this thing of being like, oh, there was a joke on the internet where you could wear an extra prosthetic finger so that people, if you did a robbery, it's like, no, that was generated, like stupid stuff. But but these are the reality of this plausibility, and that some of the best pictures we see is these like plausible images. So it's like I don't know, an animal doing something that's kind of cute or funny, like you said, really
surfboarding guinea pigs.
Yeah,
or
like
something like that.
yeah, people are like, oh yeah, that's great, because it's kind of real or not. I went to this beautiful nature photography award in Sydney the other week, and I was horrified because I was walking around the most stunning photos that we have captured of the natural world in its all majesty, and I literally was walking around being like, is that generated? Is that generated? Oh, yeah, it's right. Yeah. And I'm like, what the hell have I done to my own brain? So it is kind of like this next level that we're moving to, where it's like fantastical in the sense a kid could make their dream unicorn, dinosaur, beast, whatever, and it looks like it's real, but then also have a picture of a cheetah next to it, be like, cheetah's kind of lame. Look at my amazing, like it's crazy where we can go.
It's definitely an interesting spot. And I do think that some of the prompts, particularly of what are the visual things that are coming out at the moment, are just a really fascinating reflection back on the people that are out there prompting it. But talking about media credibility, and we also touched on earlier in this talk around TikTok, quite proactively inviting AI creation. And one of the things that TikTok is doing, I don't believe it's completely mandatory yet, but they have pop a little badge on saying this is AI generated content, or we think it's AI generated content. And when it comes to particularly so-called credible or mainstream media outlets, I'm interested in the team's thoughts around, do we need to disclose? Do we need to acknowledge if something's AI generated? Bhautik, do you want to jump on that one?
Without question, yes.
Yeah, great.
But I mean, I've got a very conventional viewpoint around that. Like provenance is very important, right? When it comes to news, I think when it comes to sort of things that are important, it's really important to disclose like where it came from, what happened to it. But there are shades here. I think things can get very complicated and very strange. There was a case just a couple of weeks ago where it was just doing the rounds online again, just one of those things where folks were finding that if they took their images, like just photography, and they ran it through tools and they did just minor fixes, removing blemishes, just whatever, right? But they use an AI tool to do it. The whole thing would get flagged as AI generated on Instagram. And that's really strange. So where do you draw a line between what's AI generated and what is, like, how much, like, you've got a real picture, how much as a percentage does it get modified before it gets flagged as AI generated? What if it's a whole bunch of little edits versus one big one? And like you've got an original photograph and you've recropped it to change the meaning. Is that the same thing? Like I think there is a renegotiation here around media literacy that needs to be done. That, again, this is a conversation that we've only just started to have.
Absolutely, and we've definitely had a flagship event in recent months with Princess Catherine's image with the family. It was before her announcement about taking time away and the rest. And what was particularly interesting to me, as I was just amused and entertained and petty like everyone else, but what was very interesting to me is that AP, the Associated Press, which is literally a world image bank of credible journalists, things, actually spiked that image and doesn't stand up by it and put out to all media outlets, we don't stand by the integrity of this image. And since the royal family has been putting out other images, they're checking them and they're not backing them, which is unprecedented. So that was one that really hit a headline in an unusual way. And there's a very good chance the image wasn't even AI adjusted. It was probably just a clumsy Photoshop job. So it's definitely sparked a few conversations, that's for sure. Now, Bhautik, you've used AI in film and you're now working with Canva on some of their newer AI tools and things. I personally have been loving them sick. And obviously Canva's taken, also just as you mentioned before, like some of the things that used to take 2 days to do with an image, you can do with a single click. And I'm really curious, your everyday Canva user, your everyday punter, what are people actually most interested in using? What are they engaging in?
I could tell you.
I'd love to know.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who are generating images.
Mm-hmm.
Same case as Leonardo. Like it's pushes a button for a lot of folks, right? It's they need a piece of media, they need some sort of background image, and that seems to be scratching that itch there, and that's great, right? But outside of that, I'd probably say that the utility that gets used the most is two things. One of them is just erasing things from pictures. So we've got a tool that's just Magic Eraser, and we will just remove an object from a picture. That works quite well. It gets quite a lot of use. So I think for folks who are looking to sort of refine a picture and sort of remove distractors, that tends to be a fairly big one. And another one is a tool that we recently released called Magic Grab, and that will allow you to sort of take an object out of a picture. And what it will do is that you can take an object out of the picture, but then it will leave the rest of the picture intact, so to speak, right? So it will paint over the background, and then you can move that object around. And one of the things that we recently released that we'll see how it goes is sort of like, I guess, sort of the complement to the other two, which is just this blend thing. And that allows us to put objects back into a picture. That's very early. I couldn't tell you about whether it's popular or not yet, but it's going to be quite interesting.
Amazing. I guess there's an elephant in the room that I just want to touch on briefly, maybe quick tips of the hat, but it is around the sustainability of AI in general, in terms of sucking up the grid, sucking up everything, energy, water supplies, that kind of thing. And, I feel in a lot of senses that this is beyond, the horse has already left the burning barn. Should we put a halt on AI for a year or two and we can find better, more efficient processing tools, or is this, we're here?
I mean, yeah, so GPUs are things that you need for compute are intensive. Every single company is trying to lap them up, buy them up, that kind of thing. This is, I definitely think, one of like the most pressing topics of discussion in the space of AI. I don't know if you want to, you're more technical than I am, but it is something that we definitely need to figure out as an industry. You talk about pausing it. We attempted to pause that with 6 months in Silicon Valley. Absolutely not. Nobody's going to do that. So I think, again, it's like the social contract comes in. It's like, how do we start to do these things? I suppose the like counterpoint is, if something took 2 weeks worth of power to make beforehand, but now you can do the same thing in a day, does that balance it? Like, what's the balance? If, again, shit example, but like if I'm going to do an entire photo shoot and I have to fly in models and I have to get and do the transport of an entire shoot and set up, and the cost of like running a production for 2 days to get a modeling shot, when I can just do a modeling shot and insert the clothes, like, does that balance it out? So, I mean, these are bad examples, but does that come into the calculation? Like, where is the calculation? If you can be more efficient in a shorter amount of power, like, does the math check out? I don't know. I'm not a mathematician. I don't know.
It's a great point.
But it is something that keeps me up at night for sure. It's like, how do we fix this as a society?
Yeah.
Taking a much more narrow view, I'd cautiously optimistic. And it's because of two things. Research that is happening in terms of just making the model training. So there's two components, right? There's the training, which is expensive. It takes power. That I don't think is necessarily going to go anywhere. That's always going to be a very power intensive, very difficult process to do. It takes a lot of iteration, right? But then there's what we call inference, right? Which is actually running the models and using them to do tasks, right? So generating text, generating images, editing things, whatever. And the inference part is getting significantly more efficient, right? So we've got better algorithms for doing it. We've got better ways of doing it with much smaller models, right? So especially if you adapt them to sort of particular tasks, you can make the models significantly smaller, right? And where this gets really interesting is that from a hardware point of view, there are in the works, I guess these are sort of like starting to make their way into consumers' hands. You've got what's called sort of like, I guess if you like, there's some people call them neural co-processors, but the idea being that you've got a separate piece of hardware, typically in phones, that is dedicated just to sort of doing hardware, to doing sort of like model inference. And it means that you can run these very sophisticated models with very low power on your phone rather than running it on some server somewhere. That I feel like is coming astonishingly fast. I'd probably say that we're going to see, like, if I were to make sort of like a hand wavy prediction, I'd say that we're going to start seeing some of these really big, sophisticated models just turning up as sort of like a day-to-day thing, probably in about a year on most people's phones, which is really kind of a shocking thought.
Yeah, for sure. Just to sort of wind up the discussion a little bit before we go to, some questions from the audience. We obviously know that AI is not going away, and it's going to really help artists enormously, as it already is, in terms of their self-expression, just the pace, not having to spend 2 weeks editing a single photo shoot, their ability to research, people are being able to do so many different things. We can start with Jessie and we'll work our way around. In terms of becoming friends with AI as a creative, if you're mentoring someone, what would you be suggesting?
Yeah, the only way to learn is to play. You have to play. You have to try the tools. Like, I think last year I got on very, very early. I was on like January last year. I was playing with AI. I think, DALL-E and Midjourney, and then found Leo through that process. But like, even with Leo, I still use like 3D AI tools. I use music AI tools. I've done video, different, like all of our different like video competitors. Like, the best way to learn a skill is just by trying and trying. Or you'll find the one that you feel really like comfortable with as well. I think that's a helpful way of going about it. You also learn what it can't do. And so I find it very ironic when people, like, oh, you just pressed a button. And it's like, no, dude, I spent like 3 days trying to get this thing to be exactly what I wanted it to be. So I think like there is an illusion that it's very, very easy. And a lot of AI artists or AI creators get dismissed for their practice. And the reality is, to get good work, like, it does take a bit of work and training, and like it's just a different process. Like, this is just a new tool that requires a different process, and it's a process like we've never seen before. Ironically, I have a master's in screenwriting, so I used to write what I saw in my head in scripts. And like my dream, like my absolute dream was like, no, if only you could see, like, if only you could see what I can see, if only. And now I'm like, and it's out there, and like my projects can be so much more persuasive because I can show people literally what I'm seeing. Humans are visual. We are visual humans. Like, we rely on visual information. Visual information determines so much in the world. So if you're able to really, really nurture and figure out how to use this tool, like, yeah, you'll be miles ahead with the quality of how people take your work seriously because it looks better or it feels more persuasive, that kind of stuff. Like, yeah, we didn't really get into the commercial stuff today, but like, obviously as a company, we do look at the different verticals that could benefit from this technology. Like Bhautik said, like, it's like, why are you using this? And so we're constantly like, well, how does what we have actually improve your workflow? Like, I've got a demo with fashion agency tomorrow, and it's like, we work with fashion designers. Okay, how can fashion designers use these tools so that it's going to be significantly more productive? One of the workflows I'm doing at the moment is they submit a mood board. So like, in the same way as a designer, as a creative, you'll like put together a mood board being like, this is like the tone, this is the feeling, these are the textures, this is the material, blah, blah, blah. And then I take that, get ChatGPT to review the mood board, be like, okay, can you articulate what you're seeing and all of that? Then I take that and put it into Leo. I'm like, great, so this is the mood board, this is our words. Now I want you to go make a series of 20 different outfits based off that. And all of a sudden, bang, I've got a new idea for a series of fashion things. Now, those pictures that we've seen are not the end result. Now, me as a designer, I'm like, oh my God, I love that headpiece that you did. And oh, those shoes are great. And we'll take that back of the skirt bit and we'll do that. And now we're going to do it. Now I go draw the thing that I've just created from all that inspo. I've drawn out my design. I'm like, yeah, this slaps. Go put that in as that edge to image thing, which we showed you earlier. All of a sudden, bang, now I've got an image of this thing. And that workflow is just like an idea. It's like, look how cool this is. And when you go into pitch, which if you work for a studio, you're always like, what about this? What about this? What about this? My thing can be there. And now we can take the next steps into iterative workflows. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. I do love this stuff. And I think like it was hard because initially, like last year, if you worked in AI, you got slammed. Like, it was not accepted. This year, people are curious. And I think like it's been, as somebody who genuinely believes in I just see our industry should benefit from this technology more than anybody else. This should be our tool to be able to leverage for our creative expression. So I hope to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. Zoe.
I would say that I would echo a lot of what you said, in that it's a new tool, it's a new skill set. You can't just jump in it and on day one expect to get amazing images. It doesn't work like that. So I would still classify myself as quite a beginner in image prompting and using Leonardo, but I've already seen like a lot of progress in like, I don't know, overall maybe 3 or 4 days of using it. So, and I think as you get to know the tool, you are able to use it to to create more original things. I think when you first jump into it, you end up with things that are just not very original, because you're not able to explore all the nooks and crannies and like get exactly, your unique interpretation. You're kind of just relying on, the references around you. So my advice to anyone trying to get into it is just to jump in and practice.
I did a demo for Zoe, and then Zoe went and did some amazing work. It's very, very good with Love and Money, but it was awesome just being able to like take a studio, train. We get super users, so people in the studio who are like the best at it. Ta-da. And then got to see the work, which was really exciting. So it's been cool to see in Australian studios just like adopting these tools.
Yeah, I would say that in the graphic design world, like there's surprisingly little adoption of.
I think there's a lack of education and there's so much resistance because it's fear. It's fear.
It's a lot of fear. I agree.
Fear and threat. And again, like I speak in the creative industries, and you get a lot of resistance, and I understand why. But it's this idea, the threat of jobs being replaced. And I'm like, if you are not using these tools, then it's like these tools are there to expand your like toolkit. So yeah,
I agree. Yeah, I Love and Money. We're really big on tools and giving our clients tools and giving them tools to create their own work. Like we want them to come to us for like the magic and the special bits, but day to day they've got assets to create. Like we want to give them the agency to make those day-to-day assets. And so things like AI tools can fill that gap.
Awesome, thank you. Bhautik.
I think I'm just echoing what everyone else has already said. Give it a crack, right? But I think there's a choice about whether you want to go broad or whether you want to go deep. And I'd recommend, you could try a little bit of everything. But, especially if you're new to it, I think it's worth going a little bit deep. Think about it's like learning an instrument or learning to sort of express yourself in a particular medium, like with drawing or whatever. Pick a creative expression that you care about, that you're motivated in, and try doing that task through one of the AI tools, whether it's making a piece of music or whether it's sort of expressing a drawing or whatever, something you have some connection to, because that will give you that little bit of an impetus to really sort of explore it. And I think anything that you can do to sort of like help you get into it a little bit more deeply, really sort of explore your creative side a bit there is definitely, first of all, it's going to feel good, right? And then secondly, it will allow you to sort of look at it a little bit more objectively, right? And just go, okay, rather than be carried along by the hype, just look at it, okay, is this good or not? What do I need to do to make it good, right? And I think that's a worthwhile exercise.
Yeah, I love the idea of a project, like having a project. People who are really good at it will be like, I wanted to make my kid a unique birthday card, something silly like that. And all of a sudden, or like make a birthday song for my partner. And so you'll use ChatGPT to like write the lyrics. You use Suno or Udio or whatever to make the song. And then you use Leo to like make a picture. And then you can chuck them all together in Canva. Australian companies, we love it. And then all of a sudden you have a video that was completely generated, but it's got a unique song, it's got a unique lyrics, it's got unique visuals, and it's got unique movement. And like you've made that in a day, and it's just cute.
Amazing. Excellent. Thank you so much.